Hello, Salome B, and I came to bring you the news. Today we are going to talk about Michael Brown and some of the case laws that have flawed and caused the death of Michael Brown. Okay, the first thing we want to talk about is an article that came out in the Richmond Times-Dispatch on March the 13th. And the article states that the documentary that claims that Michael Brown was trading marijuana for cigarillos is debunked, according to the store owner. He states that Michael Brown did not rob the store. Michael Brown did not trade anything for some cigarillos. They state that Michael Brown left the store and left the cigarillos there because they were unpurchased merchandise and that the store wanted them back. And they also say that the video that Jason Polock is stating that shows Michael Brown is selling marijuana for some cigarillos, they said that you cannot tell what is being traded on the video. So what Jason Polock is stating that he believes that he traded some drugs in the store. Now, Jason Polock is going to make a narrative and then he's going to make a movie, and then this is propaganda is what this is. And we are going to debunk this right now. I will put the article link down the bottom, and I will put where the article was featured, and it's in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. Okay, now let's talk about Michael Brown's case for a little bit. The attorney, Jay Kinsler, the attorney for the store owner, states that there was no such transaction that took place in the store. There was no understanding of a drug deal, and that Michael Brown left the store, and he left behind the unpaid for merchandise, and he left the store. And that is the last time they saw him before he was fatally shot. Now we know that the grand jury and the Justice Department could not find any wrongdoing by Wilson, and that's Darren Wilson. And we know that Darren Wilson resigned and he went into hiding. We know that Wilson did not call the shooting in at 12:43. And the police department was troubled. Most officers were let go, and new officers were rehired to regain the trust of the citizens. So Ferguson, Missouri had a problem with officers, and the black citizens and the white officers had a problem. They had multiple issues. Okay? Now, we're going to talk about deadly force, because deadly force is what Darren Wilson used to apprehend or kill Michael Brown. And I say apprehend because this is what Darren Wilson is saying that he was trying to do. He was trying to execute and apprehend because a robbery was called in and blase, blase, blase. That story doesn't even add up. Okay, they're saying when the Supreme Court seldomly addresses the subject of deadly force, and when they do address it, they cite legal justifications for deadly force. Now, the law that they use is Tennessee versus Gardner, 471 U.S.S. 1985. Now, this law states, and the United States Supreme Court held that under the Fourth Amendment, when a law enforcement officer is pursuing a fleeing subject, he or she may not use deadly force to prevent escape unless the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect possesses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. It is found preventable escape is unreasonable seizure under the Fourth Amendment. And then Graham versus O'Connor, 490 U.S. 386, 1989, the actions of the officer has to be reasonable when using deadly force. Okay, now let's talk about the Tennessee versus Garner. Now, Tennessee versus Garner is basically very clear cut, and it states that if you're an officer and you feel that the person is a threat, then you may stop them with deadly force, which means if you got to use a gun, if you got to use your nightstick, you can do that. And that's where the law is flawed, because they said that to prevent a seizure, you can't do that. You can't use deadly force to prevent someone from fleeing, because that's a seizure, and a seizure is an arrest. Okay, unless you have probable cause that they are going to do injury to you, kill you, or whatever. So that is where the law is flawed. And I say it's flawed because that leaves room for a cop to use an imaginary story and say, hey, I got beat up. He charged at me. You know, he was trying to get my gun, and I shot him because he was a threat. He could have went out in the public and did something to somebody. Whatever story you want to make up, that gives them room to make up the story, create the narrative. And the narrative has been created. Darren Wilson, what did Darren Wilson do? He said, I got beat up. His face was red. He got cuts and all this. And then all of the government people were saying, some of the Bar Association was not buying it. The Bar Association stated that we don't see any bruises and he's full of it. But the grand jury and the Justice Department went with the fact that they didn't find any wrongdoing because it's justified in the law. Now, what did Darren Wilson do to cover his ass? Oh, well, he got rid of the evidence. Michael Brown's testimony. If Michael Brown was allowed to talk, his testimony would have been, I did not rob the store. The store owner didn't call the police. I didn't trade drugs in the store. Blase, blase, blase. But since he has a doorway to use and say, hey, this kid was trying to do something to me. He's 200 pounds, he's 6 foot whatever, and I couldn't do anything with this kid, so I used deadly force, and I had a right to use deadly force because he was going to kill me. He was grabbing for my gun. Now, when Graham versus O'Connor states that it has to be reasonable, I understand if the person is going around raping women and, you know, the police are trying to apprehend the person and they don't want him to become a threat to everybody else and they can't seem to get him to calm down. Yeah, I understand deadly force. But to use deadly force on a man that you're not even apprehending, and then when we look at the 911 call, we don't even know what was said on that call because they don't even know what was being called in. And then he didn't even call in the shooting at 12:34, which means he's already in the wrong. It's too many discrepancies in this case. And then Michael Brown's family will not get justice because Michael Brown is dead. He's the evidence. And the police officers are drawing their power from the Sixth Amendment as a witness. They are the witnesses on the stand saying that they saw a crime or they had suspicious or probable cause to think that a crime is taking place. And this is what has happened. So now let's get back to it. Stranger Fruit has been debunked by the store owner. He's stating that there is no such thing as a surveillance showing Michael Brown selling marijuana for some cigarillos. No such a thing. So Jason Polock's movie, whoever wants to go see it, fine. You want to see it, that's fine. But make sure you have both sides of the story. If not, it's one-sided and it's biased. And we cannot allow people to continue to release this stuff in the public and not challenge it, because we have too many laws on the books that have not been challenged and they have errors in them. Tennessee versus Garner is an error in the law. This is why Oscar Grant got shot in the back. Another cop stating, oh, well, I had to stop him because he might kill somebody. Then he tried to run away from me and I got to stop him from fleeing. When the law obviously states that you can't stop someone from fleeing because that's a seizure under the Fourth Amendment. But unless he's a threat and he's stating he's a threat, how's he the threat when you're only picking him up for child support? What is the threat about that? This is what I'm saying. When you start looking at the laws that these people have on these books and you start questioning and logic and reason these laws, you will see that these laws are flawed. And these laws and the flaws in them is causing the problems that we see. And then what Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump are trying to do is clean government out and get all of the people out of government that are making the law and making the law that's flawed. Now, Congress is a part of this. They're making laws that are flawed and people are getting injured. And then Jeff Sessions is focusing on police reform, which when I studied Introduction to Criminal Justice, that's all they talked about is police reform. There's a style that the police use, and it's called the Watchman style. And the Watchman style was used during the riots in Los Angeles. And they stated that the FBI stated that this was an incorrect way of using the Watchman style, because what happened was there was a spike in crime when they used the Watchman style, because all they did was enforce the law and they did not solve any problems. They didn't use the service style of policing, which is to solve neighborhood problems that are causing crime. What they did was use the Watchman style. Enforce the law. No matter what you do, enforce the law. If you got to rough somebody up, enforce the law. That's the Watchman style. The Watchman style, a police officer can rough you up. He can use persuasion. He can use manipulation to get you to obey the law. Okay? So, I came to bring you the news, and the documentary, Stranger Fruit, is debunked by the store owner. The store owner is the guy who saw Michael Brown before he was fatally shot. And they have him on footage. It's coming to the store, leaving the cigarillos, going out of the store. He didn't rob the store, and he did not trade marijuana. This is Salon Beat. You have a nice day.